Hello, everyone. My name is John with Depot Adventures. We are the walking tour company that does free Melbourne walking tours, as well as a bunch of other tours. And we're just recording a few videos to share with you some of our love for this amazing city behind me right now. Today, I want to talk to you about trams, my favorite thing. In fact, we're in one of my favorite viewpoints right now for trams. This is you're actually to the back of you right now is the old Treasury building in the heart of Melbourne's city centre. Over here is Collins Street, and just down Collins Street, you have the Paris end of Collins Street, the fancy high society shopping district. Because Melbourne has a stereotype here in Australia. Melbourne is known as a city that can be, maybe potentially, a little bit full of itself. At least that's what the rest of Australia mocks us for. But we have earned that right, ladies and gentlemen. We have worked hard to be a little bit braggadocious about who we are. Case in point, trams. Melbourne is a city that came long after Sydney. Sydney started in 1888 with the first fleet's arrival, but in 1835 is when Melbourne began. And our creator is a man named John Batman. It's not because we're obsessed with the DC comics that we always have Batman Park and Batman train stations. It's because we're naming it after the man who created this city grid. And unlike Sydney, Melbourne is a grid. This grid worked perfectly for our Melbourne tram network, which would later be put in 1885. When the tram network went in, it was the height of the Victorian gold rush. You can't even imagine what the city looked like during the gold rush. People were pouring in from around the world: Poland, Hungary, Ireland, the UK, Canada, the US, and they were looking for riches. It was a time of great inequality, of social reform and revolution throughout the world. And Melbourne as a city became the landing point for a lot of people looking to escape some of the troubles from back home. They would find troubles over here, though, as we in Australia were discussing how we should structure our society. And some of those structures got established with the Eureka Stockade, which we'll be talking about in another video. But for now, the thing that you need to know is that Melbourne had lots of money and lots of people. The population of this city went from 75,000 to 500,000 in just 10 years during the Victorian gold rush. This is a time when there's so much money coming in that we want to spend it in the top technologies of the day. Of course, we didn't have Teslas back in the 1800s, and so the top technology of the 1800s was a steam engine. And over in the UK, people had developed a way to take the steam engine out of the train car and to put it into a box in the end of the city streets to allow for cable cars. See, there were problems in places like London. London is a place where you had an existing city, and making a public transportation network with trains got to be a bit of an issue. Here in Melbourne, though, we got to create this city using the technology that was available to us of the day. And that new technology of the steam engine was put in place with cable cars. At the end of each one of our long streets, like Collins Street, look at that beautiful tram shot right there. At the end of all of these streets were these big steam engines that were powering cables that stretched down the length of the street. The train cars themselves would grab onto the cables, and those cables would pull them away. It wasn't the most elegant of solutions, and I always talk about this on my walking tours, which is that it's easy nowadays to think that the world that we have in now is the most optimized version of the world. You couldn't get a better world than what we have today, as I'm recording this on June of 2020. That is not the case. Those trams are inefficient, ineffective, dangerous machines that we just keep on using because no one's thought to make up the prerogative to have a better option. In the early days, these cable cars had a big problem when they turned. So if you wanted to take a turn on a cable car, you had to literally detach from the cable and then do the turn. And cars would have they'd have two workers on each train car, each cable car. You'd have a conductor and a driver. The conductor would be the one who is basically taking the tickets and making sure everything was in order. The driver is the one in the center console of the tram, pulling on cranks and levers to make sure that the train was going in the right direction. If you wanted to turn, you would have to pull on a few cranks and push on a few cranks, which would do a few things. Number one, you would release from the cable that the cable car was grabbed onto. You would also adjust the train. I don't know what the word is for the things, not the train tracks, but the things the tram connects into, but those things. And so you'd have to adjust those so they'd take a left turn, for example. And then the driver would communicate to the conductor to communicate to the entire group of people who are on the train. And you can hear how loud it is right now. They would say, lead! And everyone in the train would have to lean to try to make that left turn. It did not always work. In some cases, there was not enough momentum behind the train for it to make that connection without having to be pushed. And how do you push the tram? All the men on the car got off the cable car and they would push it through the intersection. Eventually, when it made it through, the driver would be able to reconnect the new cable and it would continue on. This is not an elegant solution, but it's the solution that people went with from 1885 through to today. In fact, the tram network today is the oldest continuously operating tram network in the entire world. Long gone are the cable cars though. You'll have to go to San Francisco to see active cable cars in operation. Here, we have electric trams crisscrossing our entire city. That's why we have those big arms on top of the tram pulling power into them. The trams are not the safest in the world as well. One of the big hazards for drivers was that if you were driving on a hot day, a hot, windy day, the ways that the trams got traction on slippery days, they would have sand underneath the car, which would release onto the track, allowing for more traction. Whew, there goes my umbrella. That traction, though, would create a hazard on dry days when the sand could get wedged in between the wheel and the track. And then you had some trouble because if the electricity did not have a way to get to the grounds to be grounded, then you had a dangerous tram on your hands. You had a situation where the metal surfaces of the tram would become electrified until the driver found a way to grab a bucket of water from some other shop, throw that bucket of water onto the tracks, onto the wheels rather, to help reestablish that electrical connection. It is wild. It's one of the things I love about Melbourne is it's a city that's built by the Victorian Gold Rush, and we as a city still have some of that history today. Nowadays, trams are not the most efficient thing in the world. The average speed of a tram is just 16 kilometers per hour across the entire network. Here in the city center, it's only 14 kilometers per hour. These are not perfect, but it's what we have today. And nowadays, if you want to get something to remember your time in Melbourne, you are going to get yourself a tram souvenir, tram t-shirt, a model tram, anything like that. The trams are my favorite. If anyone's been on my walking tour, you've probably heard me say versions of this story right here because I love trams. Trams, to me, represents a through line through Melbourne's history that lets us talk about everything from the history of feminism in Melbourne with women's rights movement and women being able to work, to the history of the labor movement, the massive citywide strikes that went on here, to a bunch of other examples of things that made big impacts, like when we had the Commonwealth Games and Karachi sent us their own tram that was all decked out. If you're interested in finding out more, the Melbourne Tram Museum is open on the weekends over in Hawthorne. Amazing place to go to. It's not every weekend. I think it's the 2 weekends a month. You'll have to go on their website to find out more. I'll put the link in the description right over here. If you'd like to find out more about Melbourne, we would love for you to come on our tours. Our tours are live again. Our name is Depot Adventures. You see, boop, boop, right there, the logo for you. It might be reversed on this video, though. My name is John, and to find out more, just go to depotadventures.com or come and visit one of our free Melbourne walking tours, which goes every single day. Thanks very much, and if you'd like to hear more about Melbourne, please comment on this below and tell me what you'd like to hear about next, and I will record my next video there. Thanks so much.